You can start. All right.
All right, so let's go ahead and start this Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. It is December 11th and it is 7 p.m. We are going to begin with election of officers. Niles, do you want to discuss that procedure first?
So, yeah, basically just what I said is just that the board traditionally elects a chair and a vice chair. The commissioners appointed Brian as liaison, and Martin was appointed as the new member of the planning commission. So you can start there.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and open the floor for nominations to the position of president first.
I'd like to nominate Lexi Huber as president.
I'll second.
Okay. Do I take this to a vote? Can I get a vote on
Yep.
president for myself, Lexi? All in favor?
Aye.
And I nominate Chuck Stum for vice.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, it looks like that was quickly accomplished.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Congratulations.
All right, so moving on to citizens' comments. I can't actually see what is happening in the room. Are there any comments, or should we begin with announcements?
No, there are no citizens for comments, and there are none online as well. All right.
Then, Niles, do you have any announcements for us?
I don't think we have any at this point. Just, the changes as I discussed, and we're good to go.
Any announcements from the commission, Brian?
Don't have any updates. They are, we talked about the fact that we're going to be discussing parking, and they're really interested to see how we progress with that. And there seems to be some general interest in our CAD work as well. So other than support and curiosity, not much to come down from the commissioners.
Okay, sounds good. All right, well, let's move on to approval of minutes. Did everyone get a chance to review the November 13th minutes?
Yes.
Good.
I'll abstain.
Are there any edits or changes needed?
I move we approve the November 13th minutes as presented.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. So, new business. We have the applicant request for extension of the Bricken property preliminary plan. Do we have representatives? I think I see
Yep.
representative.
Yeah, and let me just switch something here. There we go. All right. So Frank Jameson, on behalf of the Bricken property, requests an extension to the preliminary plan for the Bricken property. Plan was approved on December 15th, 2023, and therefore was valid for 12 months. The standard extension for a preliminary plan is 12 months.
And at
Mr.
this time, staff has reviewed the request and it is in line with the regular protocol. The applicant has been going through the procedures and processes moving forward throughout the development process, so staff recommends approval.
Frank, did you want anything to add?
I would like the approval for 12 months. Is that,
That's the standard. That's what we standard do.
I would like the standard approval to extend for another 12 months the preliminary plan that has been approved on the Bricken property.
I'll make a motion if anybody doesn't have any questions.
I'll just add that I wasn't here for the original approval, but I did go back and read it, and I didn't see any issues with it there, so I'm good with that, and I'll second.
Okay, so I make a motion, we approve the Bricken property extension as written.
And we have a second. Then, Kevin, you said you second.
I second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for coming, Mr. Jameson.
I hope not to see you in 12 months.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
All right. And moving on to old business, it looks like. I didn't see, just a moment, I didn't see the parking discussion on here. Is this part of our follow-up discussion on the cultural?
Yes.
Just-
I figured because it was connected to all of this, that we would just make it part of it. I
Yeah,
didn't
that
know.
was the only context I brought it up in. Was
Right,
the
exactly.
down there.
Yeah,
Okay.
so my thought
I
was,
wa-
oh, sorry, Lexi.
No, sorry. It's very difficult to do this by Zoom.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure and clarify that this was not two separate items, but it
Yeah.
was a combined item, and you answered that, thank you.
Yeah. And so my thought was we could take it in sort of any order you wanted, but I know Chuck wanted to talk about the parking, so I figured we could start with that. I kind of did that in the way I did the packet, where I included Chuck's email, and then the actual parking regulations for the town in the packet. And so that's what I figured we would do first, and then we could have the discussion about the follow-up items from last time with what I sent and what we put in the packet and such. Unless there's a reason to do differently.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so we've been talking, wow, it's just me or is that echoing?
Yeah, I'm working on that too, but can,
That's cool.
yeah,
Just want to make sure it wasn't my imagination.
yeah, no.
So we've been talking about, well, I've been talking about at least considering something, a change in the way we approach parking for town, particularly the downtown area. And using the cultural arts, well, since the whole downtown area is now becoming the cultural arts district primarily, it seemed like a good time for the topic, particularly with the potential for more, hopefully, more entertainment type venues, hopefully opening up down there. So, long story short, what I'm proposing and what I sent around were a bunch of references, including from Strong Towns and a bunch of other, both local, regional, and national municipalities, to pretty much do away with the minimum parking requirements and leave it to the combination of things. One, primarily leave it to the businesses. I'll set aside residential for a minute. Let's come back to that. That one can be discussed differently. But to leave the parking requirements out as a minimum and let the businesses decide what they need and what they can do for their needs and their buildings. There's a bunch of different rationales for why this trend has been growing across the country for the last quite a few years. With global warming and more environmental concerns, one area of rationale for this is why have all these large paved over areas that are very frequently not utilized or very underutilized, for one. There's a whole set of discussions on that topic. Two, parking and zoning requirements in general can be onerous, cumbersome, costly, et cetera, for the businesses. And we are, almost anybody, including us, Montgomery County, that has minimum parking requirements, they're best guesses at best, frequently one size fits alls. And each individual business doesn't necessarily shoehorn into those requirements necessarily. One of the ways a lot of places municipalities address the parking needs when not requiring off-street parking is to supplement them with parking garages, municipal parking. For example, you got Frederick, downtown Crown, everyone else has parking garages. Obviously, we would never have multi-story parking garages in Poolesville. It's just cost prohibitive, and that's more than we need. But we do have the ability to supplement the traditional off-street parking with more formally designated municipal parking. So we've got, and I lost my numbers, but we've got around 25 to 30 spots around Town Hall currently, roughly, and we're picking up more with the new development next door. But even more importantly, just blanked on the real name for the skate park.
The Dillingham Park.
Dillingham, oh, jeez, sorry about that. Dillingham Park has quite a few parking spots already, and granted, there'll have to be some stormwater management when the new building goes in there, but there's room for even more parking in the large, quite large, dirt / gravel section there. I counted them about a year and a half ago, and there's over 30 spots there. And that's only a short block and a half walk, and that's Poolesville, short blocks from downtown. We here with this facility are about one block and a half, and again, they're much shorter blocks than you would have in Bethesda or downtown Crown or in Frederick. And I know it's a long shot, but I would also like, if we decide to go down this route or at least pursue it, I'd like to see if we can get fair access to attempt to get the county to let the high school parking lot be used in an official fashion for municipal parking off school hours. I know traditionally Montgomery County schools would not do that, but there's a lot of other things that were different than the rest of the county out here, and this feels like it's right up Fair Access's alley for them to potentially look into that with them, and I'm sure it would require some pressure probably from the state level, because I think a lot of it will end up being about liability. But if we can get the ability to, on top of the Dillingham lot, this lot, what we're getting next door in the next few years, and if we could supplement that with even more from up at the high school, that's a lot of parking, all within a small half block to 1 block walking area from our core downtown cultural arts district. And that would, I think, allow us to really much more easily do away with the minimum parking requirements that we currently have in the downtown area. Now, when researching this, think about this, I think that would, in my mind, mostly apply for your typical commercial. If someone were to do residential, and the one I keep coming back to is, let's say somebody raises the old shopping center and put in, let's say, a 3-story, I don't know, 75-unit apartment complex there. That would still have to have, I think, its own parking requirements. Unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever, we're out here in the country, so a lot of the municipalities, like, again, downtown Frederick, downtown Crown, downtown Bethesda, they've been able to do away with a lot of their residential parking requirements, or shrink them greatly, because so many people are just not driving. But unfortunately, we don't have that option out here. So obviously, we still, for residential, still have the need for everybody to have, what do we use, 2.5? 2.5? Yeah. I don't know that it might be worth dropping that from 2.5 to 2, depending on what type of thing. But in general, I would carve out residential from this discussion. One, I don't think residential would have much of an impact unless we have a large apartment, condo, multi-use get built down there, which would be wonderful if that were to happen. So anyway, that's the kind of the concept in a little bit of a nutshell. So I just wanted to see what people's thoughts were on that. I know it kind of goes against the grain of what we've traditionally done. And first reaction, a lot of people tend to be negative to that proposal initially. So
I'll start. You want me to start?
sure.
My reaction is I think it's a good idea to look at this stuff. I think, all the articles that you sent, it's clear that this is like a trend, and it reminds me of the thing where businesses were always putting parking in front, and now they realize that that's not the best way to do it. Put the parking around back and have your business close to the street. Urban design 101, I guess, or whatever. And so I mean, I think that it's good to think about these things, be forward thinking. I think you're right, Chuck. I think we could probably lose, at least reduce these parking requirements. In all this, have you thought about have you thought any about like, I know you're trying to get away from like parking requirements, but have you thought about like perhaps like on some of the land the town owns, like we could put like a little municipal parking lot in anyway?
Well, that's what I mean. That's what I was,
I mean, we're going to have that with the Wilshire development or whatever they're calling it. But it sounds like it's going to be like, available for certain things, but not always available. And maybe we change that. I don't know if that's something we could do. Maybe it's just like, always a lot there, overflow for events happening in town or something like that.
well, more importantly, it would be the Dillingham Park with the
Yeah.
at least 30. Again, I lost my notes on that one, but I think it's 30
There'll be
plus.
80, there'll be 80 spots there, Chuck.
I knew it was a large number.
Yeah.
Does that include the grass area, or is that just that 80
Yeah,
number?
that turns into a parking area.
Yeah.
Okay, so that includes all of it eventually
Yeah.
becoming,
Right.
all right, so that's,
For the
That's what,
community
that's
center.
what our concept plan looks like now.
right.
Yep.
Yeah, right. So we would have to make sure, a lot of people aren't even aware that park's there too, that there's parking there, so we have to kind of brand it,
Yeah.
brand it and push the concept if we were to go there, we make sure that people realize.
Wayfinding.
This is our municipal parking, and we're really trying to encourage a more walkable pedestrian area. But yeah, that's a lot more parking over there, so that plus this, you're up over easily 110, probably into the 130 spot area.
I'll say also that our existing commercial parking areas are oversized. So I don't know if we can we should be able to factor that into some sort of a calculation, because you never see the CVS parking lot, that whole thing. There's always open spaces, tons and tons of open spaces there. Even with the exception of during ballet, the one across the street's normally pretty available, spots in the back. And if we do want to connect this might be getting in the weeds a little bit, but if we do want to connect the Dillingham Park to kind of the town, I'd like to formalize some sort of a walkway,
Yeah.
because right now it's just kind of haphazard.
That would be a good point.
But I think it's very reasonable. And I want to be aware and figure out how we would do, how would this happen, right? I mean, do we say, okay, so we drop all the parking requirements for commercial development? I mean,
I don't think we could just drop them. My thought is, it depends on the use, and it would almost be subjective if you want to take away all of the requirements, because some uses are going to need parking spaces right there close by.
or want, right? If they want them and they need them, then they would be compelled to do so, right? Would we have to write a regulation that says they have to do it if they need it?
That's a great question, and I don't have the answer to that, but we can get that.
Yeah. I mean,
And
we-
you're
we
right,
should-
there are so many commercial areas that have too much, and every one of them has been through a variance, but those are private property, so we won't be able to utilize those.
Correct, but some people might even be able to reclaim some of those, but that's a whole separate topic. But generally, I mean, it varies from municipality to municipality, but a lot of the ones that have done it have just, flat out removed the minimum parking requirements from their regulations. Some have supplemented them with recommended, but then they're just recommendations. It's really up to the business. If the business feel they need X number of spots right there for the building, because they're not going to attract customers. If they don't, then yes, that's their call. But maybe if I go around and look at downtown Frederick, for example, I just use that one because I go up there all the time, so I know the downtown area quite well. I mean, you got the 4 parking garages, and then the one large surface lot back by the bus depot. So you're walking a minimum of 1 to 2 city blocks for just about everything, and everyone that goes downtown recognize that. I have not paid much attention to the relatively recent residential stuff that's been cropping up along Carroll Creek, but I'm assuming that does have its own parking, and I'm fairly certain they would. But most of those, almost none of those downtown businesses have anything other than maybe a little bit of alley parking, and that's really just for 1 or 2 staff. So
Yeah,
where I was going.
General on-street parking too.
What's that?
General on-street parking also.
Right.
Yeah, we don't have.
No.
We have almost, I'm just thinking, we have almost no ability for on-street parking. I can't think of anything off the top of my head in the, there might be, I'm missing a little teeny bit, but there's not much of anything in the,
Not much.
in the business district. Hence why this really only works for us if the municipal parking areas can soak up the traditional business by business parking needs, at least the way I look at it.
There's no centralized downtown parking area at the present time.
So I'm really curious, I mean, Wade, John in particular, you guys have been dealing with the whole parking even longer than I have, and it's always been an interesting waiver, debate, what have you. Well, I'm curious what you guys' thoughts are on the topic. I know it's a little off the wall, but.
What I've seen,
First, I thought-
go ahead,
go ahead,
Wade.
John.
Go ahead. You're up first.
First I thought Chuck was crazy.
I kind of thought you would.
But now that I read more of those articles and different things, and no, there's definitely something to be thought about it. I don't know about wiping them out completely. For residential, like you said, I would want to stick to the 2.5 just because people have people were to visit and whatever. But each one of those topics is its own debate issue. But in general, I think it's a good idea.
I think most developers, depending on the type, problem is that your businesses change. Okay, so there's going to be, for instance, if you had a law office that's in there and you're having a constant circulation, then you're going to want to have that. You're probably going to want to have that. You have other offices, like, for instance, if it was an engineering office, you got the employees, but really you're not going to have people walking in off the street to come visit the engineer, right? So it's almost, you kind of caught in betwixt, right? Because you can't hit everything at one time. I did run into, I mentioned this to Niles, in Fairfax, they had something that I had never seen before. And that is, it's a privately held office space parking area. And then after 5 p.m., it converts to public parking. Okay, now I don't know if that is, I didn't dig into it too much, but I'm wondering if that was part of the permission for the construction of the building that it serves, or how it came to be, so that you link one to the other, and this is, as almost as part of the plan that after 5 p.m. it becomes public parking.
I bet you it was, my guess is it was probably planned out that way, just especially if you just think about the liability issue.
Right.
Which is what I think the Montgomery County Schools had their biggest
Right.
concern whenever this topic seems to come up is the
And
liability.
that's what you're going to run into with MCPS.
Yeah.
Is that they're, unless you're using their facilities, and I kind of get it to a certain extent, that you don't want people parking there and then leaving the car and then come the next morning when cars start to come in, that they don't have the ability to get into the parking spot for their staff. So it kind of gets caught in a loop. My experience has been that everybody seems to be coming in and asking for less parking than what we've typically had in our manuals for grocery, for Tractor Supply and such things like that. And you're seeing that. The only other thing is it's a balancing act in that the citizen, are you trying to bring people from out of town into town? Or are you trying to serve the community itself? Or is it both?
I think for the Cultural Arts District, it's probably going to be a little bit of both, because the overall goal is to build and enhance that district to encourage more people to come in. Locals is a classic example, as well as
Riverworks.
thank you.
Yep.
Blanked on that name. So get a lot of people from town, but you just look at the license plates, we're bringing in a lot of people from out of town as well.
Right. You saw what happened with when Riverworks came in and wanted to do their work, and we had our parking regulations, which makes us, you're having a theatrical performance, you're gonna have lots of people coming to see it. And you saw the issues that developed with that and the private property owners' concern of liability, on their property, using their parking lots. So it's a bit of it's a little tricky to get around some of these things.
But I'm going to argue that in that particular case, you're going to have that liability issue no matter what, because
absolutely.
Look at the Bassett's parking lot, for example. You've got at least at least 4 different businesses other than Bassett's with people regularly parking there, not counting students at school. So that becomes almost an enforcement issue for the business per se.
Until that first person gets towed, and then,
Well, exactly. If the
Yeah.
business, if that individual business wants to enforce that, that's up to them. And you run into that in most other areas as well, where you've got a gate,
it's
signed off parking lot, like this is for X business use. Don't park here, or you will be towed.
it's just one of those things that takes a lot of research and looking.
It's a definite mindset and cultural change.
Hey, I'm curious, out of curiosity, how far back does the Bassett's parking lot go?
To the grass.
Okay.
It was never actually shown on a plan to be that way.
Who owns that grass property?
On the strip between them and Morningstar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm curious if the actual plots even show that.
We'd have to take a look.
I mean, and the reason I'm asking is I wonder if it makes any sense, like, and this is sort of going in, sort of like trying to facilitate what Chuck is saying, but if we have like a small municipal parking lot that, like, maybe the town could purchase or something like that just worked as like overflow parking, or like, just for whatever might be happening in the downtown area, like that we could use.
Yeah.
That way we'd be less likely to get caught with our pants down, like, with like not having enough parking.
Right, which was why I've been proposing that we really push both parking around Town Hall and especially the 80-plus
Yeah.
slots over at Dillingham
Agreed.
Park. Just
Yeah.
make sure that people know that they're there, because a lot of people don't know that those are.
Right. And they don't know that we live in this world now outside of Poolesville where everything's illegal, and like you better not park where it doesn't say specifically you can park, because there goes your car. So yeah. And the other thing is, Wade, I don't know if this is something, or Wade or Niles, is possible, but could we assume the liability of the Montgomery County, the public school parking lot, like after 5 o'clock, like from 5 until like 6 in the morning or something like that? I mean, is that something people do, like a shared liability?
I can check. At the top of my head, I don't know, but we can find out.
Yeah, that would be probably something like an MOU or something to figure that out.
Yeah,
And then
because I
maybe-
mean, like, I know
maybe
our
weekends
insurance would
only
cover it and all, but
thing.
maybe that's what they would need to like say, okay, fine, yeah, you can do it. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of investigation that would need to happen.
So and to answer your question, the directly behind Bassett's is owned by Benjamin Molahem, Benjamin and L, which is the Bassett's piece. Okay, and then I think they actually extend over into this Williams Swanstorm's property.
Yeah, and I know there's been discussions about where those lines actually are. Let's just put it that way.
Oh, sure.
Well, we're going to find out soon.
Yeah.
Oh,
Kevin, do you have anything to add to the discussion? I haven't gotten to hear you.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea to have, to lessen requirements and let businesses, kind of decide what they want to provide as far as parking goes. I think we could be smart about, signage to guide people to where we want them to go. There could also be other things we could do. I think we've got pressure points on weekends. I think that's where parking mostly comes into play. I don't know that during the week we ever have issues with overflow of parking pressures, but, things could be very simple solutions like for people to come out here, a lot of bikers come out here and park the car and go for a bike ride, provide an air pump, guide them to places, parking lots that have air pumps, so we get them into Dillingham Park. Let's say there's a place you can fix your bike up there. EV chargers, again, that's another way to guide people to get them to park, because that's more and more people are using electric vehicles coming out here. So I think we can be smart about it. We definitely have what we need. It's just getting it to work for us. Right? So I think it's a good discussion.
And I guess it's probably it goes without saying, but my point was that I like what Chuck's proposing. I would also like to see like a little municipal lot in the center of town. And maybe the Wilshire thing satisfies that. Maybe we can negotiate with the high school. Maybe, I don't know, like if the people that own the back of Bassett's would, like, if they don't need all that parking, if they would be willing to, like, sell us a little chunk of lot for 30 spaces or something like that. Like, whatever we could do, it'd be nice to have a little more parking right in the downtown area. But like, I do like the notion of not having every business to have like, strict parking requirements. So I'm sort of like, does that make sense? Like I'm in favor of like a lot, but I'm also in favor of changing the zoning.
Yeah, but you seem to not be liking the Dr. Dillingham Park, the 80-plus spots there is our main public parking area.
I like that. I do. I just wonder if people, we're kind of a lazy society. If people would say, I don't want to walk over to like Riverworks or Local or the downtown area all the way from Dr. Dillingham. I don't know. And wouldn't we run into the same problem where like the county would have to, like we're giving them the land. So do we reserve right to like use that parking for our own stuff on off hours or?
That's a good question too. I think there's no restrictions placed on it. We're going to lease them the area. Well, we take care of it. It's a partnership. That's a good question though. Another one.
And then the other thing is like, I assume the community center will be busier during the day, but I also assume that like there'll be stuff happening in the evening too. And like they might, the county might have like their strict, bureaucratic laws that like, the wouldn't allow us to use it for whatever reason, or only allow us to use limited amounts. So that's maybe something to consider.
We would have to carve that out in an MO, regardless of what we do with parking. This conversation, that would have to get addressed as part of the MOU with them.
Because you need skate park and everything else.
Yeah,
that's going on.
exactly. There's
other big events. I mean, Poolesville Day, the tree lighting, are the two biggies that come into mind. Those get used heavily.
But no, I think that's a great resource to use that parking as well. But I'm just thinking like on a cold, windy, rainy day like it is outside right now, people might, be like, let's just not do it if they're coming from out of town. A lot of this is going to be for people that, it's for people who live in town, but also for people who live out of town. And that's assuming we actually get, stuff going on downtown that we're going to want to draw people from. People are going to want to come. So hopefully that all happens. But
I'd argue though, downtown Frederick, you got the same issue. I go downtown Frederick all the time, or downtown Bethesda, where I'm walking multiple city blocks in the weather to get to where I want to go. And I just know, but my first thing I do when I pull in any area like that is I look for the public parking signs.
Yeah, that's true. Sure. I also wonder, like, this is a bit off topic, but like, what happens if Locals loses that parking lot that they have? Like, they lose their rights with the Oddfellows or whatever.
Buyer beware. Then that's an issue for them.
I would like to interject a thought here because I keep hearing the same assumptions. And the assumption is across the board that parking should be convenient, it should be available, and it should be free. And I would ask you to consider that in areas that have well-managed parking, you only have access to 2 of those 3. So I'm not sure that this idea that Poolesville has insufficient parking is correct. It has insufficient available, free, convenient parking. But in well-managed parking areas, you get to choose to. So perhaps we can consider this discussion in an idea that maybe if there is a lot, that during high traffic or high volume times, such as special events, that is not free.
That's a good
It's an
point.
unpopular opinion, but there is plenty of parking in Poolesville. There are thousands of parking spaces within 4 to 5 walking blocks of downtown.
Now,
They are just not convenient.
I'm with
Well,
you
yes,
on
and
the, I'm with you on the
some
paid
of those
parking
spaces are
topic.
private parking lots, right?
I mean, I'm talking street parking.
Yeah, if you go
Okay,
walk off.
yeah.
I'm with you on the part, on the, I didn't bring up the paid parking just because I figured that was a whole nother little rabbit hole to go down. It's very interesting. That's what a lot of the municipalities do that go down this route is they also use this as a revenue generator. I just wasn't sure if town staff, how much they want to deal with that, but it's definitely a good idea to consider.
If we're going to explore options, I think we should put them all on the table and especially get them out front early. And I'd like to just echo sort of Kevin's point about the multimodal access and sort of building in that idea that multiple ways and give people multiple options in order to access downtown is important in this whole vision.
And to Brian's point, going back to about enhancing the walkability, especially if we were
Yeah.
to push more, actually, I think regardless of the parking topic, we need some better connectivity somehow back to Dillingham if at all possible.
Right, and I think that's something we can look at, but part of it is figuring out where would be best to do that, and the specifics of it with property owners and
Yeah.
things like that along the way, but we can look into it.
Currently, you do have, on the one side of Wooton, the townhouse side, there is an existing walkway. It runs all the way to the high school area
Right.
and actually goes now all the way down to West Willard, which it didn't before.
I forgot that didn't used to be
Yeah.
sidewalks there. It would be really nice if we could have something official that cut through right here as well. But we don't have any access to that right now, do we?
Negative.
It's all private,
It's all private.
quid pro quo.
All right, so does town staff feel that they have enough to sort of continue to look at this topic and circle back to us?
We do. I've got a bunch of questions written down here. I'm going to talk to the town attorney and actually talk with Fair Access too. And, yeah, we'll just come back to you.
I think we should just keep in mind when we are talking, and just like really just validates Lexi's point a little bit more, to anybody about usage of current parking spaces, that, you know, it's very, asphalt's not very kind to the environment, right? The less asphalt that we can put out, the better off we'll be environmentally. We certainly can't make any connections to our water, but, you know, if we have to talk to MCPS about usage of their lot to help us if needed, you know, I think that's a very good avenue to pursue it, and that we're making an environmental stewardship move as well. It's not just trying to save money. So, let's keep in mind.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate you bringing up the environmental aspect. All right. If everyone is good, shall we go ahead and move on to more of the Cultural Arts District discussion? Niles, can you sort of lead that, if you don't mind, or get us started on the changes that have been made and you want to update us on?
So first of all, what we did last time, based on last time's discussion, is we updated the definitions. We updated the design guidelines, and we updated the sign code itself, which I included as well. So what we did with the definitions is we included the definition that we had talked about for self-storage, sort of the storage units, which Lexi had brought up. And so then we also included those as a special exception in the use chart. On the design guidelines, we replaced the freestanding signs with temporary freestanding signs per what we had discussed. And then another thing, which I'm going to start with here for your discussion, was Wade and I had a discussion with the town attorney that touched on questions related to sort of residential development in the cultural arts district. So first thing is to make clear is we talked a little bit about existing uses. There are 7 houses in that area currently that are used as residences. So one of the important things is we talked before about making residential uses by special exception for cultural arts district. So first thing is that if, say, something were to happen, a fire, natural disaster, something like that, they have 6 months basically to use that, to maintain that use under the way that this would be written. So that's something to keep in mind as we think about residential. Or if, say, a house becomes a business, they can't go back, basically, without sort of meeting other criteria. And then that goes to the other point that came up from that discussion, which was, in doing it by special exception, we'll probably have to create criteria of what you want the residential to be in the cultural arts district. And part of that comes from the way the code is written now. Special exceptions are primarily for commercial development. So it talks about, if this is the only place you can do this use, if it's not repeated somewhere else, you can do it, right? Things like that. So to think about special exceptions tend to be granted because they meet the criteria. So if you want there to be special, if you want to do things like Lexi talked about and you guys have talked about, first floor retail, second floor apartments, then that might be part of the requirements that you make to grant a special exception for residential in the cultural arts district. Sort of what you want to see. And so that was the first point that I just wanted to bring up for you guys to discuss, since we hadn't discussed that in detail yet. So I wanted to start the discussion there and see if you had any questions or feedback on that.
And actually, that's 2 points.
Yes.
Made right there for discussion, yeah.
Yeah.
So sticking on that one for a minute, so the special requirement. When we're doing the comp plan and a lot of the conversations we've talked about in the last 2 years, we've said multiple times we'd like to see more of that higher density, lower cost housing available in town somewhere. And about the only place we have left that we can really try to control and guide that is in that downtown area, the central business district area. So assuming that statement was still accurate with everybody, then my mindset would be to have a requirement for the special exception to be that it's some form of higher density housing. What that actually means, we might be able to figure out later, but the concept of single-family homes for anything new, it doesn't meet our goals and our needs that we put out in the comp plan at all.
Think of brownstones or?
My perfect world, I keep going back to my apartment, my 3-story apartment complex would be perfect for me. But if someone could do, this is one reason I've asked about a couple times about duplexes, but anything that has a lower cost of entry than a single family. The multi-use with the business retail first floor, business on second floor, that works. That fits into that.
I like
model as
that. I
well.
was just going to mention that. Like you see at the Kentlands and places like that, how and the interesting thing about that is it's not like you don't have somebody who has to come in and rent from somebody. Like you can basically own your business / residence. And in some ways, I bet that would be more appealing for people because, you wouldn't be giving a whole bunch of money to rental money. You know, you could just buy the property outright, finance it, and like you have a place to live too. That makes sense? Everyone's awfully quiet.
It makes sense, but I'm not sure how realistic it is. I think a lot of those are rentals
Okay.
over time. Either way, though, it helps with that goal of the mixed use and the more, well, yeah, the mixed use down there.
I mean, like, I think it's already being done in 2 places in Poolesville, like the Cleaners. There's a guy that lives above the Cleaners, I believe. And then that new store, the Sweet Pea store. I think they have a couple of units in there that they're planning on renting, or they are renting out for like just like, you know, living space for tenants.
Yep. Rental properties, rental units are at a premium around here. There are not many.
This idea, Martin, I do like this idea. I will say that this brings us back to the parking issue in that I think they're required in their residence for professional residents, they're required to have an additional 4 parking spaces, which means that we definitely need to combine these ideas.
Yeah.
So is everybody in agreement with residential units or special exceptions and criteria will be high density or mixed uses only?
Yeah.
And then we could add architectural on top of that and everything else, but just to make sure to put it in a box.
It's good with me.
Works for me.
Can I ask if where's the 6 months come from?
That's in the code.
Currently.
Yeah, the code currently says if you cease uses after 6 months, then you'd have to either apply for another special exception if it qualified for that, or it would revert to
Yeah.
the zoning, basically.
Well, I can just imagine someone who has one of these residents being alarmed by that, 6 months, because, in the example you have, fire, natural disaster, typically that process is going to take quite a while, isn't it?
And that was our concern as well in discussing this with the attorney, is bringing up those type of scenarios. But, I mean, that's also something that we can that there might be more discussion to be had on how we deal with non-conforming uses and how we would engage in that. I'm not sure that there is. I'm just saying that would be more discussion. What's your thought, Wade?
No, exactly right. So take the resident on the corner of Wooden and West Willard right there, that yellow house. Let's say that they went ahead and turned it into a boarding house for a couple of years, and then didn't work out. They wanted to go back to a residence. They wouldn't be able to do it. And maybe that's what we want. So, I mean, so that's the conversation.
Yes, I think that you can continue to use the property as a residence, a single-family residence, but once you change that use officially, then you lose that grandfathered status. I think, Wade, you're absolutely correct on that. I do want to sort of circle back to the time frame. I'm so glad you brought that up, Kevin. It's very concerning. I wonder if there is a way to tie in that, if your home burns down and you are in this area, then reconstruction has to begin within 6 months, but completion is not required until a certain, whatever time frame you want to make. Because I do think that saying, hey, you burn to the ground and you need to have it reconstructed in 6 months is completely impossible.
Yeah, Lexi, the one thing that you're going to find, especially since I've not personally gone through it, but I've had family members go through it, sometimes the insurance process takes longer than 6 months. It sometimes it took a couple of years to get that squared away.
Yeah.
So you may just want to put in, some language with the attorneys. They can come up with it, I'm sure.
No, if that's what people want, I think we can come up with something as one of the conditions for the special exception.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's very different when that case of something burning down versus someone willingly changing their use. Those are two
Absolutely.
very
Yeah.
different.
Absolutely.
And there might be places that already have something like that, where they have a process for that scenario.
So that does kind of, that could be a deterrent to changing the use of a residence, right? If we wanted to encourage people to try something with their residence other than a single-family home, there's no safety net, right? I mean, if they say, hey, let me try a bed and breakfast, and that doesn't work out, you know, then they go to sell, okay, we want to move, we want to sell, but they can't sell as a residence anymore, right? It's got to sell as a bed and breakfast. You know, I think that's, why would they try it then? The risk might be too high. Or if they wanted to open up a boutique on their first floor and it didn't go so well, and they're stuck with having to operate a business out of their first floor. Anyway, it's just a thought. I'd like to see that those houses that are in the CAD are kind of cool houses.
Yeah.
I think they really have some potential. And I don't know how we can. I think what you're saying to do probably makes the most sense. It's just I can see it being a little bit of a deterrent. But I'd like to see those houses try and be something different someday.
Well, what I see some of those houses doing is getting bulldozed and those lots sold. And when they get sold for a different purpose, I don't want them putting in a new single-family residence. If someone comes in and buys it, I want them to have to do something that meets our, the comp plan's goals for downtown. And I think that's much more realistic when we think about the redevelopment nature of the whole downtown area. Because a lot of this conversation focuses around, don't forget, redevelopment is a fundamental concept for the future for what we have in the comp plan.
Yeah.
So I don't want someone tearing down a block and thinking about redeveloping it as a bunch of small single families.
Right.
I mean, look at the house on, what's that, on Wooten and one by the bank. The road, I always blank on that road. I'm sorry, not by the bank, by the post office.
The post office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That property.
On Norris, yeah.
Norris, sorry, I was blanking Norris.
Yeah.
That one strikes me as a prime one for someone to come in and do something else other than residential with that lot. In that case, that's one always jumps out at me.
Yep.
We've had issues with that one over the years, so I can easily see that.
Yeah. So maybe the key is to, historic homes get treated differently, right?
Which there aren't many of, are there?
There's
Well,
a
the
couple.
two on the corner of Elgin and Wooten on
Yep.
either side.
Right.
Those are the two I was thinking of that would be kind of, we'll do something with.
Yeah.
Oh, those over on that other side.
Yeah.
Yeah. I honestly don't really see anybody doing anything with those other than them remaining residential, but I see a much higher probability of someone taking down some of the other existing ones and wanting to do something completely different with them.
Okay, well, we can run with that and come up with something to present to you.
Sounds good. All right. So the next thing I had, this actually deals with the murals that we talked about murals last time. But one of the things that came up in our discussion with the attorney was about commercial speech and that sort of issue of what a mural says and how it says it. So one of the things that we found in talking to the attorney is that generally municipalities like the city of Baltimore and others tend to just not have speech in the murals for the specific reason, because it gets into regulating commercial speech. So
By speech, what do you mean specifically?
Text.
text,
Thank
yeah,
you.
Text,
'Cause
exactly.
yes,
Two pictures is speech as well.
right.
So I just
But
wanna make sure
in
we're
this,
clear.
yeah, under the
mean
case
text.
law,
Okay.
commercial speech is text.
Okay.
So what we did though is we updated the definition in the definitions to include that a mural would have to be reviewed and approved by the planning commission. So that addressed the question that you guys were sort of having of how to control a mural, but also sort of steered away with some of the the text-based questions that we were kind of getting into. That it seems from other communities that the sense has just been a mural is a mural, it's the image, and then trying to control, the look and feel of it by having it be approved by the planning commission. So we wanted to just get your feedback and thoughts on that as well.
And my feedback is, I think you're right. I think that we do need to have some control over it. Frankly, I would like to be able to have the planning commission vote on, like, even if there is no text, like, just because, you can say something offensive without putting text in it. You know what I mean?
Murals are not signs, so they do not have text in them.
Yeah.
To be the legal definition. Once you
Okay.
let them paint it on a wall, letters and stuff, then it becomes a sign. And then if it can be freedom of speech of the commercial person, and then you can't control whatever it is,
Yeah.
size or anything.
Okay, so we shouldn't allow signs. And what about so I guess what you're saying is that do we want to require approval for just murals that aren't signs?
Right. That's
Yeah.
the way that we wrote it. So the way we wrote it is that the mural doesn't include text based on the definition, and then
Yep.
that you would be approving that.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think we should approve the non-sign murals. Yeah.
And then there's even a little fudge factor room in there for if, like, a picture of White's Ferry could say White's Ferry on the picture of a ferry, that it wasn't advertising something that's in that building.
Yeah.
If
Right.
that makes sense. So it's not,
Yeah.
that is
It's-
not connected or associated with the business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's examples that there's so many lawsuits. As we started going through this with the attorney,
Yeah.
we were just pulling lawsuits up from every city, just everywhere. It was crazy.
Yeah. No, I believe it.
Any other questions on that one?
I think it's a good
Right.
settlement on that.
And then, so what we did is, we also updated the sign code, which I included in the packet, to remove the sign review board, as we discussed last time. We made it then that the reviewer was either staff reviewer or made the planning commission in circumstances where they did not conform to the code, would be the planning commission. And then, as with all other things, if they wanted to appeal or had a variance or something like that, it would go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. So that was sort of the basic outline based on our discussion last time, to follow up with that. In addition, we had some questions about, again, sort of different legal questions, and so we also updated the temporary sign language with ones that come from Prince George's County, that are basically the ones in Prince George's County, to make it more uniform and to take out things related to speech issues. So this was, again, the same issue that we came up with commercial speech. We also found it in relationship to political speech or civic speech or things like that. So the temporary sign now just basically has the location of the sign at least 10 feet behind the street line. That's the PG County one. The maximum number of signs was 1 per property fronts. And then the maximum area would be 6 square feet. So that's all basically from Prince George's County's code, which our attorney pointed us to. And that's just a sense to sort of clean up some of the language. So this isn't directly related to the Cultural Arts District, but it is connected to the overall idea and aesthetic. So that was one thing that we brought up based on case law and things like that. So I just wanted to bring that up as well. And then the other thing is I cleaned up the intro, the purpose section, because it was a page and a half, and I thought it was a little bit denser. So we made that more streamlined and tried to pick out the key points we were trying to make there. So just the feedback on any of that for the sign code.
Hey, Chuck,
Yeah, is it?
I might need you to step in. I am having severe, issues with my connectivity, so if I don't respond, you might just have to take over.
Okay, I thought we were just being quiet. No problem.
No, I've definitely lost you guys several times in the last 5 minutes.
All right. You're coming in fine on our side.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
All right. Good. But I did hear this last part. Did we get to the discussion about Part H under Section F of the signs? Did we talk about prohibitive signs and the section that was highlighted?
Not yet. That was related to what we were talking about earlier with the mural, but this is signs painted or having adhesive lettering directly on the exterior wall, window, or other structural part of the building. So that would be a prohibited sign. That currently is what it is. And that's the idea that a sign has to be a sign on the building. It can't be a part of the building is the basic idea of it. So this goes back to connected to the mural. So
Okay.
if you have commercial speech, this sort of helps maintain that separation, unless you want to go in a different direction with it.
No, I'm fine with it. I just thought highlighted.
Yeah, that was, sorry.
If we needed to have a discussion or it's just, it's okay.
Yeah, it's connected to the mural discussion, unless you wanted to add something, Wade. I think that was the,
No, the more we dug into the sign stuff and the precedents that have been set by the Supreme Court lately, it was just the less you could do. Then you'll see that the portions of the code that allowed it so many days before an event and then take it down after an event, you can't have that anymore. You can't regulate it because it's I forget what the reason was, but
it was.
the attorney just said that you can't have, what was it?
It was related to speech again. So basically the idea is like, if you have, like, part of this relates to political signs. If you have a political sign and you're making a political statement, the Supreme Court basically said you can't limit when people can make those types of statements. And similarly, there's an issue in Arizona where churches were putting up signs for various different events they were doing. That was also deemed protected speech. And so the idea was the response has been from other jurisdictions in dealing with this issue is just to get rid of limits altogether, and then deal with what they called, blinking on the exact phrase, but essentially there has to be a strict scrutiny applies, and so it has to have a high relationship between government interest and what we're doing. So a lot of the regulations then are size, location, and where you can have it, because that interferes with traffic, or that interferes with clutter, for example. So the number of signs can be limited, but it's not as much those speech-related issues. So that was the main thing.
So it's very weak now
Yes.
Yeah.
from a code enforcement perspective.
Out of curiosity, have we had many issues with those types of temporary signs in the last year or two?
So there's been times where we've had complaints about certain things with signs, but and some of them are related to these locations or things or tripping hazards. I've dealt with that both here and elsewhere, where people would put things too close to the sidewalk.
Or blocking the line of sight on the road?
Exactly.
Those are,
Yeah.
anything outside of that?
There's been a couple of questions about political signs and in how long they can be and things like that, and so those have been sort of the other ones.
Like all those Brian Bupp signs.
It's funny, if you go on Google Maps and look down Fisher Avenue, like by the Hart's property where my brother lives, and you'll see my signs and Alan's signs on Google Maps.
Yeah.
The street view. I was at Jim's front yard the same way. I didn't look, but
That's funny.
So really, there's not a lot of differences in the sign code that Niles put together here and what's allowed in the other zones.
Yeah. So that was the
It's all
intent. The intent
aesthetics of it, really.
was to make it consistent. Yeah.
Consistency is good.
So it looks like we're zeroing in on this sort of sign, analyzing this in the next month or so.
Yeah, I think
Did I cut?
that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. I just kind of wanted to know how close we were to sort of wrapping up this portion of it.
Yeah, I think the sign part we're pretty good. I mean, we'll also talk about the guidelines, but I updated them per what we discussed about last time. So as I said, that's the last thing in the packet, is the design guidelines. What I basically did there was replace, as I said, the freestanding with the temporary. And then I updated some of that definitive language to make it more definitive. No more the prefers, those type of things. I took it out to make it more straightforward. So unless you have any other comments further on those guidelines, I think between the two, I think we're pretty good on the signs unless anybody has anything else.
Sorry about that. That was my ring notifications, and there's
No
people
problem.
laughing on our front porch.
All right. Well, then, do you want to tell us, if there's no more comments or questions on signs, you want to tell us about these renderings? I'm very curious.
Yeah. So for John and Wade and I, so there's two things I want to point out. One is we're currently we're sending out letters to the property owners in the CAD area to let them know that we'll be doing surveying of that area. And so that's one part of it. And then the other part of it is looking at renderings and seeing what it will look like to have wider sidewalks or different frontages to give you a sense of what, with the form-based zoning, what we're kind of looking for. So one of the questions, and John brought this up, and Wade and I talked about this, and we wanted to offer it to you, is do you want to see what it looks like currently with the existing buildings there to try to, or do you want some kind of imagination of what a future area could look like, or do you want both? Do you want to see what it currently looks like and sort of how it could progress based on different sidelines?
How does it cost?
Well, there will be a cost associated
There's a
with that.
survey that needs to take place, and then there's the renderings themselves, so.
Let me put it this way, how much, are you talking, who's doing that work? Is it you guys?
The renderings we're doing, and the survey is what local guys.
All right. It's not like we're going and hiring a third-party entity.
No.
No, this is all in-house.
That's what I thought, so I wanted
Yeah,
to check.
or in our normal.
Yeah.
Given that, I wouldn't mind seeing both the current and the proposed.
Okay.
If it was gonna be significant money, I might have changed my mind, that's why I asked. That's just mine.
Yeah, and
We've got a budget set that
Yeah.
we're going to spend on it.
I think there are certain streets where I know would want one view over the other, so if you were going to prioritize, that'd be one way to look at it. But other than that, both would be good.
So it sounds like we're in agreement then, that we would like to see both views if possible?
All right.
Yep.
All right.
I agree. You can't have too much information.
All right. And then just to wrap up as well, as I said, I added the self-storage definitions. I included the definitions with all our updates from last time, including the mural definition. Just was there any other comments or thoughts that anybody had on the definitions? Otherwise, I think, again, going to Lexi's point, I think we're pretty good on where the definitions are at this point. All right. All right.
All right. It seems like there's nothing to add there. I'm glad we're also wrapping those up. It's nice to actually check some things off of our list. Just
Definitely.
or to get close to checking things off of our list.
Yeah.
So before we do the renderings, we need to get the surveys done around all the properties to kind of see what is available in the right of way now, what we're going to have to request, and then what's possible, like we talked about, width of sidewalks.
So
Once we get that information, we're going to need to have that discussion so we can develop the renderings.
Right.
So that'll be something in the future we're going to have to discuss. John, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, so once we get the survey done, we'll know property lines, because we know that a lot of the properties probably are prescriptive easements. And then it's gonna be, you're gonna have to acquire easements there. then we're also gonna have to figure out what the existing conditions look like and what we can do with them. There's gonna be, for instance, telephone poles that are gonna be in the way, things like that.
Champion tree.
Yep.
Yeah, trees that we really can't do a lot with. And then who knows what else we may run into as we go on along. We do know, for instance, that if we wanted to look at Fisher Avenue in that one section where the sidewalk's 3.5 feet wide, not a lot we can do with that. And then there's other places that have the ability to be modified. And they're prime examples for changing the conditions that are out there to make it, especially going down the form-based, you're gonna have to kind of picture what you want for form-based in those areas. We can give you a profile, but you kind of need to know what your building is. You're gonna want awnings, you're not gonna want awnings. You're gonna want, how are you gonna want to stagger it? Well, first, we need to get the survey.
But just to get you guys' minds in that process of what we're gonna be looking for.
And then, so in terms of for the next meeting, then, we can follow up on the parking, I think is the priority then, and then we can see where we are.
Yeah.
You know, with the survey and
Because the
everything.
survey, there's a
'Cause there's
priority.
time. Yep.
There's a priority right now on something
Yeah.
else.
Sounds good. Thank you.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Night, guys.
Good night.
Thank you.
All right, hope you
Feel
feel
better,
better,
Martin.
Thanks,
Martin,
guys.
feel better. Lexi, stay warm.